Welcome, everyone. My name is Lori Schreier, and I'm a member of New Hampshire for Safe Technology. And I have been active on the electromagnetic field issues for several years. After becoming aware of my own sensitivities to wireless technology and learning about the science, I realized it was an important thing to be as aware of as possible to improve my well-being and that of others. And New Hampshire for Safe Tech and Massachusetts for Safe Tech have joined together to do these webinars twice a month. We feel that the biggest focus is to educate people as well as legislators and others interested in learning about the risks of wireless technology and the safer solutions that we can do for ourselves and in our communities and in our schools. And we support legislation and advocate for suggestions that were made by the New Hampshire Commission for studying the health and environmental effects of evolving 5G technology. And that report was released in November of 2020. And those recommendations are still out there, and we hope that many of them can be supported and passed in the upcoming legislative session. I want to thank the founders of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, Jen White and Deb Hodgson, and they're continuing to facilitate these webinars and the Facebook page, as well as the email list that you can join and that you're probably on now. And I want to welcome Cece Doucette, who is our friend and mentor who continues to lead these webinars for us, and she's the founder of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and she will discuss more of her background as she presents today. So thank you, Cece.
Lori, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be presenting with you tonight. And I know you may not be able to stay for the entire presentation, but thanks for doing the opening remarks. And I will go ahead and do a screen share. And hopefully in a second, we'll be able to see that. Lori, can you give me a nod if you can see my screen? Okay, thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you here today to share with you my journey in learning about wireless radiation and what we've done since then, as well as what's happening all over the United States and even around the world around this really important issue of wireless technology safety. So as Lori indicated, we do these 2 free webinars twice a month. We try to do one at the end of the day, like we're doing tonight, and then one during perhaps the lunch hour, so people can fit it into their schedules wherever they can. And always know that we're here for you. And if you cannot, or if you have loved ones or colleagues or people in your town who want to attend but can't attend live, anybody who registers within a day or two, we try to send out the recording and the slides so that you're always able to get to highly credible current information. So this MTPW after my name means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned my undergrad degree in communication studies. And I never, ever imagined that that's what I would put my communication skill set toward, is educating the public and writing to legislators and organizing ways to get technology brought safely into our homes, our schools, and our towns. So I was at book group one night, and my girlfriend Wendy is an electrical engineer, and she tipped us off at book group that there could be something up with wireless tech. And it was book group, so I just made a mental note of it. And then not long after that, something crossed my desk at work where I was the grant coordinator for Ashland Public Schools. And it too was inferring that wireless could be dangerous. So being a tech writer, I just thought, I wonder if there's any science to this. So I just started looking, and I was astounded that you don't have to look very far to find literally thousands of studies all over the world showing very extensive harm. And we will walk you through much of that science tonight. So I opened up this conversation with my schools, and, innocently enough, I thought, I would raise my hand, show the facts, and we would respond as if we had a gas leak in the science lab at school. Get the kids out of harm's way, get the teachers out of harm's way, fix it, and then resume with our education. But that's not at all what we found happens. The ed tech industry got in there and got in at the state level and started putting all of this technology as a requirement in our schools, and then started offering sweetheart deals to help get the initial layer of this technology into the school. So it was not an easy conversation to have. But when our school committee looked at the science and some other facts that we'll share with you in a moment, we became the first in the United States to have these best practices for mobile devices posted on our walls in all of our classrooms. So turn off these devices when not in use, only turn on the wireless access points when needed, because right now most kids and teachers are sitting under microwave radiation all day, every day at school. And again, our message tonight is not no technology, it's safe technology, and we'll show you how to get there too. So took a while, but we ultimately became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms. So then I went to my state senator. She and I had served together on our education foundation, and we literally ran campaigns to bring wireless tech in for what we were being told we needed for this 21st century classroom. So I went to Senator Karen Spilka, who is now Massachusetts Senate President Karen Spilka, and she put me with an attorney in her office, and we whittled out a very simple bill that would bring the right minds together at the table and look at this issue, and then they would determine what needs to happen. Well, we're still working on a set of bills here in Massachusetts. We've gotten a number of them out of committee favorably, but then the session expires and they never took meaningful action. In New Hampshire, however, as Lori mentioned, we were able to get a bill passed through the House Committee on Science, Tech, and Energy, through the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, and under Governor Sununu's pen in just 7 months' time, with great thanks to Representative Patrick Abrami, who did his own research. He's an engineer himself, and this all flies right in the face of what our engineers have been taught, that you only have to have heat from a device to raise the temperature of the skin by 1 degree. Otherwise, there's no harm. Well, that's not at all what the science is telling us. There is huge harm. You don't have to have heat. Heat's bad enough, but you don't have to have heat at the non-thermal, low-level, non-ionizing spectrum of radiation. So we became the first in the United States. At one point, we had 20 bills filed, but New Hampshire really took the lead and came out with this amazing report that we're going to share with you tonight.
This is a
Can
live
I,
Zoom call
excuse me,
on,
can I ask you to please mute if you are not actively speaking? Thank you. And then on this journey, I've had the privilege of connecting with many of the world's leading scientists and doctors. And we have a little nonprofit called Wireless Education that's now out of Canada. And we have built online courses. We can take a schools and families course and complete it in about a half an hour. Your entire school district could take it online and be trained and have a certificate of compliance for human resources and have a handy tip sheet at the end. So we have everything we need today to address this problem. And then for the first 2 years on my journey, I had nobody I could talk to about this. Everybody I mentioned it to was like, wow, never heard of it. No, don't know. And then in 2016, Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, she worked on getting smoke out of our airplanes. You know, she's just been one of our nation's top scientists for about 40 years. She brought a team of world-leading experts to the Massachusetts State House to ask for right-to-know legislation. And I went to the State House and was fortunate to be able to attend this forum. And I just couldn't believe it. We were at standing room only. And there were people from all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who knew this issue existed. So we have formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And if you haven't been out to our website yet, please do. We've got things lined up so beautifully there that will make your job of connecting the dots so easy. So please take advantage of all the resources we've got at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And we meet once a month. Anybody in the world is welcome to come to our monthly meeting. And we compare notes. Who's doing what? Who's had successes? What lessons have we learned? And what can we do to support one another? Because nobody should go through this journey alone. It's just very difficult. So join us the third Wednesday of each month at 12 noon Eastern time. Bring your ideas, bring your questions, and we'll share with you what we know is happening around our world today. And so I like to share this next bullet. Somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked if I would co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And this was held at the National Institutes of Health. And our talks were only 10 minutes or less. We were limited to that. So I gave introductory remarks. We had Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. Frank flew in and joined our panel to tell us that, yes, industry can do much better if given a nudge. And he retired and then he met with a dozen of the world's leading scientists and doctors on this and learned the facts and came back and said, in the United States, our Federal Communications Commission's guidelines for public radiation limits are not safe. And Canada's Safety Code 6 guidelines or standards are not safe. So that's really powerful to hear this from a captain of industry. We also had Theodora Scarato, who's the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably the world's largest think tank and database on this issue. She shared with us what other countries are already doing because we are way behind the 8 ball here in the United States and in Canada. We had Peter Sullivan joined this panel too. And when I was first starting to investigate this, I came across a video lecture that Peter Sullivan had done. And he was telling us that he used to be a fighter pilot. So he was way up high with very high levels of the Earth's natural electromagnetic fields, but much higher than we get down here on the ground. So he had high natural exposures. Then he had the radar on the plane, which is this man-made microwave radiation that we're discussing today. And then he had all the instrumentation inside the plane. So Peter Sullivan got really walloped with radiation. And he went on to be an engineer in Silicon Valley. And it was like his friends who invented the cell phone. So he was a gadget guy from the get-go. So he had heavy exposures of all of this man-made radiation. He wound up getting so sick, he lost a ton of weight. His teeth started getting brittle. He had all these crazy symptoms. And then when his 2 little boys came into the preschool years, both of his sons wound up on the autism spectrum. So Peter started doing his research, and he did what a lot of families will do if they have an autistic family member, is they will clean out the diet and get the chemicals out and go to clean organic living. And then they may go so far as to do the heavy metal detox to draw all these, pollutants that have come into our body with the heavy metals out of the brain and the body. But today, Peter Sullivan will tell you, if you have a child or a family member with autism, definitely do those other things if you can. But the first thing you should be doing is creating a sleep sanctuary at home so the body can catch up when it's not being bombarded with microwave radiation. So that digital detox is key. So please do share these links because they're quick and they're highly credible. So feel free to use that as a resource. Now, one of the main gaps that we had when I fell down the rabbit hole back in 2013, I want to say, is that we could see that so many people were getting sick. but our healthcare practitioners had never been trained how to recognize, diagnose, prevent, and treat these illnesses. And we will use a few different terms that can fairly well be used interchangeably. One is radio frequency radiation. That's the radiation that's being pulsed by our digital devices to send and receive data, kind of buckshot out through the air. It's also called electromagnetic fields. That is the pulsation of all these waves coming at us. It's also called microwave radiation because back in the early days, like World War II, it was the radar detectors who first started getting, the radar operators who first started getting microwave sicknesses. So that's what all this is. So when we talk about EMFs, or the Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference, we're talking about all these man-made energies. And we're so grateful that the Medical Conference 2021 ran until July of 2023. And there were 24.5 continuing medical education and nursing credits available. That credit opportunity has now expired. However, Elizabeth Kelly, who is the executive director of this medical conference, has just made all 60 plus videos from that conference, all the lectures, all the pre-course lectures, and all the panel discussions from the conference are now free for anybody in the world to go train on this through the EMF Medical Conference 2021. So that's a bit of history about how I got involved in this. But let's take a look at what caused my schools to become the first in the nation to even hang this little sign in our classrooms. I think it was when they read the legal fine print. So for anybody who's with us today, we invite you to go, if you have an iPhone, for example, we invite you to go into your settings, pull out your iPhone, hit your settings, and a little ways down, hit general. So settings to general. Once you're in general, go all the way down toward the bottom and you'll see legal and regulatory. Hit that. And then about 4 down on the next screen, you'll see RF exposure, which is this radio frequency radiation. And that legal fine print has been in there all along. And very few of us ever even knew that the manufacturers were covering their legal backside by putting this in there. When we read the fine print disclaimer, it tells us a couple of really important things. One, they tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you're tucking it in your bra or your shirt pocket or your suit pocket, or you're putting it in your waistband, or you're sticking it in your back pocket, you are exceeding our government guidelines for public radiation exposure. And as we mentioned, those only address thermal or heat effects. So the FCC continues to allow radiation levels way up here. And now we have a body of science, thousands strong, that show you don't have to have heat. We are having non-thermal, low-level, non-ionizing impacts at hundreds of thousands of times below what the industry and the FCC keep exposing us to. So showing people that legal fine print is a really important thing to be able to do, because when we open our mouths and we say, hey, have you heard what's going on with wireless? And you start talking about it harming us, the first thing people have been conditioned to think is, oh, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, right? But I will tell you, when you show them the legal fine print that's been in their devices all along, that takes it from tinfoil hat to holy moly, really? So please share that legal fine print. And if you don't happen to have an iPhone and you use a Google phone or an Android, you can just type the make and model of your phone and RF exposure, and it will pull up that legal fine print that's in your device. And our friends at Environmental Health Trust also have a page called See the Fine Print. And look at this, like the iPad had a disclaimer in there that says, you should keep it away from the body. We are seeing seizures, blackouts, and eye strain. I actually know of 2 children who had their first seizures while using the iPad. So this is incredibly serious. So use these resources, and I'm going to pause my screen share for a moment because I want to give you a demonstration of what this invisible radiation looks like, because it's really hard to get our mind around invisible toxins. And if we learned anything in the pandemic, we need to be vigilant about what is in our space. So this is the Safe and Sound Pro 2 broadband radio frequency meter. This is the meter that was recommended at the EMF medical conference. And we have doctors now who are purchasing this. It's about $400. And they're putting it into their practice. They will have their patients take it out. One doctor here in Massachusetts charges their patients $10 to help cover the cost, says you've got 2 hours, take it home, go do your scavenger hunt, write down what your measurements are all over your house, and come back. And we'll walk you through how to have safe technology. So we know this is a lot to get our heads around. But after I stopped circling my tail and said, you know what? I'm the mom. It's my job to look after the well-being of my family. So I stopped circling my tail, and one by one, I started fixing this in my house. So right now, in my house, you see we're in the flashing green. That's where we want to be. That's as low as reasonably achievable today. That's the ALARA principle, as low as reasonably achievable. And right now, our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention already uses the ALARA principle for the ionizing radiation, the X-rays, the sun, the gamma rays. They say 3 things. 1, if something is radiating, spend as little time as you can in that vicinity. 2, create as much distance as you can. And if you can't do those 2 things, then you better shield. And we'll teach you how to do the shielding with a professional, because it's not something that you really want to do completely on your own, because there are some caveats. So here in my house, knowing what I know, I just simply hardwired everything. And it's not rocket science to fix this. On the back of your router, you've got Ethernet ports. Just plug the Ethernet cables back in. And who knew? Here's a little $20, $30 adapter you can get for your devices. And then you just plug it into your device and then go into the settings and find all your antennas. You will find cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot. And for anybody who didn't know any better and upgraded to a 5G phone, you will find additional antennas that you need to disable for that. So let's look at what this invisible toxin is. So right now on my meter in my nice green, I'm at 2.8, almost 3, and the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So basically in 3 feet of air, how much radiation is floating around in my home? So we were at almost 3. Now watch what happens. I keep my cell phone in airplane mode as a rule, and I only take it out when I need to do something quick. And everything else I do on my computer, I can forward my cell phone to my landline. But let me show you what happens when I take it out of airplane mode. And all those antennas come online. Sorry, a lot of activity going on here. And I'm not even doing anything. Those are just these antennas radiating, picking up signal and data, going out and fetching it and delivering it back to my phone. So, oh, mercy. Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, I'm going to put this back in airplane mode. And we can see as it dissipates through the air, it comes way down to the green again. But it was in the extreme level, off the charts. And we went from 3 microwatts to 1,490. 1,490. And in our indoor spaces, the science wants us to be at 100 or less. They want us to be at 10 or less in our sleeping areas. And they want us to have 0 around our children and other vulnerable subpopulations. So this is pretty serious, folks. And it is overwhelming. But the bottom line is, replace your wireless signals with a hardwired cable, Ethernet adapters, and then just turn off all those antennas. And not only will it be safer, but you will have a screaming fast signal It will be far more reliable. Your data is better protected. Your privacy is better protected because it's not all just buckshotted out through the air with anybody at the curb with $100 app on their device can hack in to what you're sending over the air. So wires beat obsolete wireless hands down on everything but convenience and digital addiction, which is a real thing. So let me go back in to the screen share, and we welcome everybody to stay with us. The chat is wonderful because you can share information with one another, but it can also be a pitfall because it can be distracting, and we want people to stay focused on what we're presenting. So when we're done presenting, we will open it up and entertain questions. So please follow along with us and know that there are incredible resources all over right now. And we're going to share so many of those solutions with you. I became the first to go after a grant in my town to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan in the public library. This is the acoustimeter. Again, it was not an easy conversation to have because I was the first one bringing it to our town's attention. It took me 3 grant application cycles, and I realized I can't just go hand this to them and say, okay, will you give me money? I had to get in there and one by one educate every member of our select board, which is our form of government here in our town of Ashland, Massachusetts. But by the 3rd go round, they gave me a $400 grant to put this acoustimeter on loan in our library. And it's a great meter. Since then, the Safe and Sound Pro 2 has come out, which they're both on par. They're both about $400. This one just has a few more options on it, like you can plug it into a wall using like a phone charger. So this is the one that we would recommend today. Since then, I met a doctor at one of the medical conferences, and she and I went after a state level grant from our cultural council. We got a grant put in her library in Newton, Massachusetts, and we got funding to do some programming to educate the community. And now out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where Verizon put a cell tower on top of a neighborhood that made 17 children and adults so sick that their Board of Health has determined that their homes are uninhabitable. They went right out of their town budget with the library, and they put a Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter on loan. So the conversation has gotten easier to have today. Most of our libraries, because they're having to reinvent themselves in the digital age, they now have a library of things. They loan out all sorts of equipment. My daughter borrowed a power washer from her library. You can borrow projectors, you can borrow board games, all sorts of great things. And now you could go and ask your local library to fund a radio frequency detection meter, and we'd be more than happy to share with you the resources that our libraries built around that project in their communities. So that's something that all of us can be doing to help our towns. Our local cable stations are one of the last bastions of independent reporting left anywhere. And they love hearing from people who live in their towns. And so WACA TV here in Ashland sent somebody over to my home, with their big professional camera, and we produced a 23-minute public service announcement where folks came, where we did a walkthrough and we showed all the different exposures in my home from, the keyboard and the mouse and the printer and the microwave oven and the decked cordless phone and the laptop and all this that we've all been talked into having in our homes, showing how much radiation each one emits, and then offering suggestions for how to remediate. So that's a nice resource, and it's helped 10,000 people to date. So we're so proud of that one. And then they have also done a number of public service announcements and interviews with me over the years. And then WCCA TV in Worcester recently said, hey, Cece, it's time. You just need to have your own show so that you can showcase what's happening, whether it be in the science, whether it be in public policy, or whether we get to actually speak to people whose lives have been detrimentally impacted by this radiation. So I think we're up to episodes 19 and 20 that'll be coming out soon. And you can go watch these. They're only 28 minutes, but it's a wonderful way to keep the learning fresh. So thank you to everybody who has come on our show. And if you have an idea for somebody or a topic that would be good to talk about what's going on with wireless radiation, please just reach out, because we always want to have fresh voices. Okay, now let's look at the science. First, we'll look at the long-term effects, and then the next slide, we'll look at the short-term effects. Long-term child and adult cancers. So for years, the industry has spun it that, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so we get to just keep doing what we're doing. Well, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is arguably the gold standard in toxics research in the world, they're part of our National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. They completed a 20-year study, started back in the day where cell phones were the technology of the day, when we had 2G and 3G, which just means second and third generation technology. And they did these rodent studies. And what they determined was clear evidence of cancerous tumors, cancer, and DNA damage, among other findings. And the industry will get a hold of that and say, oh, that's just one study. You don't have to pay attention. You need more than one study. Well, right on the heels of our groundbreaking results coming out, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy came out with another large study that corroborated everything that we found with cell phones. They found the same thing with cell towers, base stations, cancers, DNA damage, and more. So we don't need more science. What we need is an informed public that's not going to sit still while this industry continues to put this electropollution in our communities. So child and adult cancers, DNA damage, and as we know, DNA is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a fetus to a child to an adult to a plant to a pollinator and everything in between. And we're damaging it. It was the infertility studies that I came across that got me on my feet and helped me to muster the courage to use my voice to do something about this. I started reading the reproduction studies and saw that they've taken male human sperm, they've exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. They slowed the motility of the sperm, and they caused far fewer sperm to be viable, or what scientists will call apoptosis, or programmed cell death. It was killing the sperm in just 4 hours of exposure to a laptop. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. We had just sent our oldest daughter off to college with her MacBook. We had just purchased a laptop for our then high school age daughter. We gave it to her for Christmas, thinking we'd give her a leg up. And where were both of our girls using their wireless device, but right on top of their reproductive systems. And now we have additional studies since then from Kaiser Permanente and others that are showing higher miscarriage rates in women who are using wireless technology around the baby bump. Neurotoxicity is a big one. Everybody today is talking about the epidemic levels of anxiety, depression. We have suicidal ideation among children and adults like we've never seen before. And when you look at the science, we have a big aha moment. Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical School. And Dr. Taylor and his colleagues did rodent studies where they exposed these mice to microwave radiation from a cell phone for several hours a day. And when the moms gave birth to the pups, these little mice came out just bouncing off the walls of the cage, much like a child with attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, just out of control energy, not a care in the world, can't focus. And we now know scientifically that this radiation can cause that. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge connections between what we know scientifically about exposing ourselves and our children to microwave radiation and what she sees in the autistic families in her care. Dr. Martin Pall has culled the science on Alzheimer's, And it used to be like cancer, that Alzheimer's would take decades to form, and maybe we would start seeing it in our 70s or 80s. Now, when you look at Dr. Paul's paper, you will see not only 70 and 80 and 90-year-olds getting Alzheimer's, but 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and even in some rare cases, people in their 20s are getting early onset Alzheimer's. We cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain with microwaves and anticipate that the brain's going to be able to keep it together. So we're very grateful when more mainstream groups get funding to be able to put dedicated resources on this issue. As a mom, I first learned about the Environmental Working Group with the incredible work that they've done on pesticides in our food. They put out the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list every year to say, really, if you can afford to get this organically, buy that organically. These other ones you can probably get away with having grown commercially, because the pesticides don't seep into the part of the food that we eat. But they now have funding, and for a couple of years now, they have had a dedicated resource working on the wireless radiation issue. And they have come out with a couple of excellent fact sheets. This one is protecting kids from wireless radiation in school and at home. And this one is about the wireless radiation impact on the nervous system. So feel free to use these resources. Again, anything blue and underlined in the slides that we'll be sending you, you can drill right into it. And these are excellent things to have in your hand to credibly open this conversation with your community around you. And children, we know, are not just little adults. They are still under development. We know scientifically that their skulls are not fully formed. They are thinner, and their brains have a higher water content. And this microwave radiation oscillates the water molecules, and that is part of what causes the harm. So when we look at this wonderful graphic by Dr. Om Gandhi, we see these three head models. These heads are all turned on their sides. The ear is this yellow dot. And we see when you and I, if we didn't know better and held a cell phone up to our head, it is microwaving about a third of our brain. On a 10-year-old child, it's microwaving about 3/4 of the brain. And on a 5-year-old child, it's microwaving almost the entire brain. So we have to be vigilant about this, make difficult choices. But once you start forming new habits, it's really not that difficult at all. And then the short-term effects. So the good news is, after learning about what we're teaching today, a lot of people come back and say, Cece, I did not want to know this. I live off of my wireless devices, but I recognized a lot of these symptoms. And then they'll take a chance. And the first step is they will just shut everything off at night. And the good news is you can still use everything that's on your wireless device without the antennas being on. So your clock, your alarm, any music, books, entertainment you've downloaded, your camera, you can use all of that in airplane mode with every antenna turned off, and you'll be safe. So people will start by creating a sleep sanctuary, and they'll come back time and again and say, oh my gosh, I slept through the night for the first time in ages. Or my children's behavior issues have calmed way down when we're not jackhammering ourselves with microwaves all night long. So who knew? But for over 20 years, the Americans with Disabilities Act, through several of their organizations, have long since recognized these electromagnetic sensitivities, and they offer accommodation recommendations. So that's powerful to share when you open this conversation. But let's look at what's happening. Again, the industry used to spin it that, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified. Well, as we discussed, now we know how the cancer is happening. Now we know how the infertility is happening. And then with insomnia, we are beings of light, which means that we operate off of our 24-hour circadian rhythm clock based on light and dark. In the wee hours of darkness, our brain, through the pineal gland, releases melatonin, and melatonin goes in and regulates our sleep cycle, but also helps to do the everyday cell repair and regeneration while we sleep, and then escort those toxins that, the debris that's left behind, escorts it out of the body through the bloodstream. What the science is showing us is that our brain cannot distinguish from natural daylight and this man-made light energy form that's this radio frequency microwave radiation. So if we go to bed and we leave on our router, we wear a wearable that's not in airplane mode, we leave a baby monitor on, we have our cell phone under our pillow or on the nightstand, we have a decked cordless phone on the nightstand, all that is pulsating this man-made light, and our brain's thinking, hey, when's it going to get dark so I can release the melatonin? And then we get into this big domino effect. If we're not sleeping properly, that leads to a whole host of other biological harms. So sleep is a really big one, but an easy one to fix. Stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, fatigue, where people are just so wiped out and they can't figure out why. Their doctors can't figure out these things. Well, here's another thing that's happening. Our red blood cells are meant to be free floating and bringing oxygen to all of our vital organs, to our skin, to everything. That's how we're supposed to operate. Well, what happens if you radiate yourself with an electromagnetic field that starts to magnetize these red blood cells that are meant to be free floating, and now we've got them stacking up and they can't get to where they need to go, and they start getting deformed. Instead of these little round red blood cells, they start looking like bottle caps and stacked up, and this is called the rouleau effect. And for anybody who used to love those chocolates, those caramel chocolates called Rolos, remember that came in a sleeve of stacked up chocolates? Imagine trying to get that through your blood to oxygenate. That's what's happening to our red blood cells with the rouleau effect. Pain from unidentified sources. Skin abnormalities. Another thing we've learned through the science is that we have little antennas in the surface of our skin that help us to navigate our way through our world, to allow us to distinguish when it's cold or it's hot out so that we can protect ourselves. Well, when we pulsate our skin with this microwave radiation, we start seeing a number of things happening. People are getting skin rashes, they're getting itching and burning, they're getting facial flushing. A lot of people talk about the hot ear too, when they put the cell phone up to their head. And our skin is constantly sending information to all the organs in our bodies. So one of the pieces of disinformation the industry is fond of using these days is saying, oh, 5G, no worries, it's only skin deep, right? Well, hello. Our skin is our largest organ and it feeds into every other organ in our system. So it's amazing what the industry will do to spin this stuff. Heartbeats that go too fast or too slow. We are biologically chemical and electrical beings. Our cells whisper to each other all the time and send information. When we bombard ourselves with microwaves, depending on your own individual proclivity, your heart might start going too fast or too slow. Tachycardia. We have all sorts of horrible things happening with this beautiful organ that operates off of natural electricity. Cognitive impairment, where we just can't think straight anymore. We can't recall our memory. Anger and behavior issues. So it was heartbreaking at the medical conference to hear these experts telling us that if we don't get ahead of this, because we know what it is doing to the brain, to the areas of the brain where we would normally have good executive functioning to make important, smart decisions, we're destroying brain cells in that area, the gray matter and the white matter of the brain. And they said that we can expect to see many more of these societal outbursts like we've seen with the mass shootings if we don't get ahead of this and stop radiating the brain and give ourselves clean environments where our bodies can heal. Anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation like we've never seen, and it was at epidemic levels even before the pandemic. So yes, we need to address mental health, but we're never going to get ahead of it if we keep radiating ourselves. So it's not just you and I, it's every biological living cell on the planet. And this is a great link here that you can drill down into these amazing resources. And you will learn what it's doing to our pollinators, our birds. They all have this symbiotic relationship with the earth, just like we do. Who knew? The earth pulses this healthy, natural energy in the form of electrons up for us 7.83 times per second. That's something called Schumann's resonance. He figured it out. The earth pulses just under 8 times per second, this beautiful healing energy that we're meant to be connected to, and all of the earth's creatures. And what have we done with digital technology? Instead of 8 times a second, in the megahertz range with digital tech, megahertz means 1 million times per second. We are getting jackhammered with this spiked erratic pulsation of microwaves. In the gigahertz range, and this is where Wi-Fi and cell phones and cell towers and utility smart meters all are, they are jackhammering us at 1 billion times per second. How they can cram a billion of anything into a second, I have no idea, but that's what our technology is now doing. And we're meant to be at 7.83 times per second. So we are quite simply getting overpowered with microwave radiation. And for those who care about our planet, as far back as 2012, there was a Greenpeace analyst who did the research on how much energy all of our technology is now consuming, and said, if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was over a decade ago. And look how much more has been pushed in on our society. So this is one of the leading factors in climate change. And then you can go and investigate what we are doing down in the Congo and other areas, human atrocities to distract or distill out dozens of minerals that are needed for every single one of our electronic devices. If we truly understood the human toll that's taking place, we would never just toss aside a perfectly good device just because the industry is seducing us with a brighter, shinier object. We would use every single device to its full and useful life cycle, and then we would be sure to recycle it at the end. The data warehouses, the networks, the personal devices, all of the streaming consumes huge amounts of energy. So never watch anything live on your phone. Never stream it on your phone. Download it first, go into airplane mode, and then watch it off of your device. Every time we send and receive, every time we charge and recharge and recharge and recharge all of our stuff, we are consuming a lot of energy. And in the background, we've been talked into getting all of these sexy apps, woohoo, convenience, do this, how fun, this and that. Well, every one of those is doing updates in the background and consuming energy too. So again, our message is not no technology, but let's learn to use it reasonably and learn all these little hacks that will teach you to have excellent technology, but without these incredible risks. So when I fell down the rabbit hole on this and I started reading all this science, I'm like, well, surely somebody's got our backs on this, right? You would think, because it's in the marketplace, so somebody's got to be looking out for us. And then it wasn't until 2015 that Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this incredible 59-page report that's free and online right at this link, called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it presumably regulates. Look at this revolving door. That's what our federal agencies have become. Industry goes in, they take over our federal agencies, they set policy, they have deep pockets, lots of money, they buy influence. And then all of a sudden we've got laws that protect their interest and not public health. ProPublica did an article just last November on this as well, how the FCC shields cell phone companies from safety concerns. And then what we've discovered is there's this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren over at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is actually who commissioned that $30 national toxicology or $30 million national toxicology program study 20 years ago that found clear evidence of tumors and DNA damage and much more. The folks who were around 20 years ago are no longer there today. Today we have Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. And when the FDA did this study that concluded clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage, that should, I'm sorry, could you please mute? That should have triggered public policy to protect you and I. And instead, what did Dr. Shuren do? He went over to the FCC and said, we don't really believe that study. Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
You have to stay here, honey pie.
Why would Dr. Shuren do that? If you look into his background, guess who he's married to? A partner in a law firm that represents the wireless industry and other big environmental polluters. So we have conflicts of interest at all levels, all the way up to the World Health Organization. If you just do a quick fact check with the World Health Organization, the first things that come up are some really old postings that say, oh, really, it's inconclusive, nothing to look at here. How would you know that because the rodent studies have now been completed, how would you know that in 2011, the WHO classified this as a class 2B possible human carcinogen? What was missing in 2011 were these rodent studies. Now that they've determined clear evidence of cancer, the WHO has reopened their investigation, not only for cancer, but for infertility, for electromagnetic sensitivities, for the impact on children, for the impact on the environment. And guess what? There's two groups at the WHO. One is the scientists who are highly qualified to weigh in on this. The other is also heavily influenced by industry. And it looks like the industry group has gotten hold of this current investigation. And we're supposed to have reports out in a year or two, but it's looking like they stacked the deck again with unqualified industry people to do this current investigation. So click on this link. It'll take you to this current thing that you may not be able to find on your own. So the corruption runs deep. So that, my friends, is all the bad news. Let's start looking at the good news. You and I can take control over the devices that are under our control. So like I mentioned earlier, go look at your router and you will find Ethernet ports. Get a big long Ethernet cable and run it to wherever you use most of your technology. And then most households have more than one device they'd like to connect with. Who knew you can just buy this little Ethernet switch for about 20 bucks. It's just this little tiny box, and it allows you to plug in directly to the router where you've got a big fat cable coming into your home or office or schools that hooks up to the router, and then you get that signal directly through the router, through your Ethernet cable that you plug into the switch box, and then you just get little cords for each one of your devices and buy these little adapters and then plug in your devices. So that's the first step. Just start plugging things back in. It's not rocket science to fix. And then you have to go into your devices and you have to turn off all those antennas, the cellular and data, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the locator, the hotspot, and any 5G antennas that you see in there. So hardwire, step 2 is to turn off the antennas. And then it is critically important that you measure, because the industry has recently said that, oh, hey, with 5G and the Internet of Things, homes are going to have 200 devices connected wirelessly to the internet. 200 devices pulsating you, your loved ones, and your neighbors, because it goes all the way through the walls and out to the street with this man-made microwave radiation. So measuring is critical. As we discussed earlier, you could go after a grant from your local public library. We can help you with that if you'd like. I know Lori and her neighbors bought one themselves together. They just pooled their pennies and got one. Others are fortunate to be able to just put out money to buy these. This one, the Safe and Sound Pro 2 from the EMF Medical Conference, is about $400. They have like a little sister one that's only in the $200 range. So that may be more affordable. So we can fix this. But let's look at the 3 areas that may not be under our direct control. The first is the utility smart meters. The second is the cell towers. And the third is the 5G small cells that are coming in. So when I was a little girl, I'm one of 10 kids. So we spent a lot of time outside playing hide and seek. And I would hide out in the bushes and I would just sit there and keep myself occupied until I got found, looking at the little dials on the meters going around and around and around for maybe our electric or our gas or our water consumption. What the industry has done is they have approached our towns and said, hey, we have new technology. You guys are currently paying employee to walk the neighborhoods and get the readings for your gas, water, and electric. And we can save you some money because we can put a digital meter on everybody's home, and then it will send that data wirelessly, and you don't have to pay those walkers anymore. So the intermediary step was they put these digital devices on, and then in my neighborhood, what we have right now, a Department of Public Works truck comes by and the guy inside points his scanner at my house and it picks up that wireless signal and they get the reading so they can send me the bill. That's a digital meter. The next step that the industry is pushing is the smart grid. And what this does is, if we look at this diagram here, it starts perhaps at your house, and then it picks up all your data, and then it sends it through to the next house, picks up their data, and so on down the line. And by the time you get down to being the end house in the grid here, you've got a lot of people's radiation pulsing through your home, and then that data gets sent up to a collection box up on a pole somewhere, and then that data gets sent wirelessly off to, theoretically, the gas, water, electric, and solar company, maybe the propane company. But there's a lot of risk around this. So if you've got these smart meters mounted right outside of where people are spending their time, if you've got a child or a pregnant woman or an elderly person or anybody with a compromised health situation, this is very dangerous. And even perfectly healthy people report getting headaches and anger and anxiety and depression and insomnia and pain and ringing in the ears as soon as these smart meters go on their home. And heaven forbid you live in a multi-unit dwelling near where they put up an entire bank of these smart meters. So they pulse radiation continuously. One of the properties of microwave radiation is it likes metal. Metal amplifies radiation. So we have seen where this pulsation of microwaves can actually hop on the house wires or pipes that act as a conduit, and then your whole house can be transmitting microwave radiation all throughout. So it's really dangerous technology. And there's a ton of reports about power surges, that these are not surge protected, they're not properly grounded, and all of a sudden you've got a house fire blaring. And what we've learned is you can't just call the fire department and have them come hose it down. When you've got an electrical fire, they have to take the time to get the electrical company to power down your electricity before they can address the fire. So this could be up to an hour. Meanwhile, that fire is raging, and now it might be traveling throughout your whole neighborhood, let alone burning down your house. So these smart meters are a raw deal for everybody but the industry. They're using them to harvest our data. There's big privacy issues. And at the medical conference, we were taught that these smart meters are one of the leading causes of sudden onset microwave sicknesses. And this is a giant environmental justice issue. We see this time and again with these corporate polluters. They come into largely minority, underprivileged, low economic areas with environmental justice, and they put in their toxic product, and then they'll say, hey, look, it worked here. We're going to roll it out all over your state. That's what they did in Worcester, Massachusetts with National Grid. They rolled out this smart grid pilot program without any informed consent. And then they went way over budget. And then they turned around and wanted to slap the ratepayers with the extra fees to pay for their incompetencies with managing the project. And so our Attorney General's office got involved from the economic standpoint, and we are teaching the Attorney General's office about the biological disadvantages of these smart meters too. Jeremy Johnson is a Silicon Valley engineer, and his wife is a medical doctor, and they were both, just rocking it with these amazing careers. And they both got terribly ill very suddenly, and nothing in his wife's training as a medical doctor could help her to figure out what is making them so sick, until they discovered that a bank of smart meters had gone up at their condo. So Jeremy has done a TED Talk, and our engineers are great. They've just never been asked to minimize the radiation. So they just want to put out as much power and radiation as they can to strengthen the signal, which is really harmful. So we can fix this. And for anybody who's talking to an engineer who says, oh no, the industry says it's fine, this is a great little 15-minute TED Talk from Jeremy. Dr. Alexia McKnight, who may well be joining us tonight, she also did a TEDx talk. Dr. McKnight is a doctor of veterinary radiology. So she works professionally with man-made radiation. She had no idea that this low-level, non-thermal, non-ionizing radiation could be causing harm until a smart meter went on her house. And she got so sick, so neurotoxic, to the point that she was out in traffic one day and her brain could not piece together whether a green light meant stop or go. It was a 50-50 proposition. And thank goodness she made the right choice and got home safely that day. But that's how bad this radiation is. And she'll walk you through her experience there as well. So those were the smart meters. Now the cell towers, they started out in our communities, way out in the industrial zones, 300 feet up in the air, nowhere near where we live, where we go to school, where we play on our recreation fields, or we worship in our churches and temples, etc. Then they started encroaching closer and closer, and the industry fixed the law such that, hey, if we can paint it the same color as the building, we can stick it on the rooftop or on the sides of the building, because anywhere it's high up, their signal can travel for miles. So that's where we got started. So it's critically important to examine the non-industry funded science, because in true to big tobacco form, every time a good study comes out, the industry will either hide it from the public because they own mainstream media, or they will do their own science deliberately under conditions that would show no harm. Well, no harm is not the same thing as safe. So look to the non-industry funded science. And I got in way over my head when I was investigating initially, and I needed to figure out how to get back to credible resources. So being a tech writer, I just created a very simple research repository that I called Understanding EMFs, because I didn't understand what electromagnetic fields were doing to us. So I have a cell towers page, and you can look here at the science, and they have done not only, the lab studies, the in vivo and the in vitro studies, but they've also done what's called the epidemiological studies to look at what's actually happening in society. And through their studies, they see this curve from the radiation exposure. So if you are living within 500 meters or 1,640 feet of a cell tower, or these big macro antennas, or now the small cells, we see higher death rates, we see higher rates of neurotoxicity and all those microwave sickness symptoms we've talked about. That starts coming down around the 500 meter mark. It doesn't actually catch up to the general population statistics till almost double that at 1,000 meters. So 500 meters is just the starting point, the minimum distance we should have from this toxic radiation. But we can't kid ourselves. There is no safe level of microwave radiation in the scientific literature. And once it's been determined to be a cancer-causing agent, any amount of that can potentially cause cancer and all this other harm. So look at the non-industry funded science on the big cell towers. And when I was testifying before the State House here in Massachusetts a couple of years ago, I ran this report through antennasearch.com. You can go there and put in any address in the US, and it will give you a return within 3 miles of that address, how many cell towers and how many antennas are in that 3-mile radius of the big ones, the macro cell antennas. When I did it for my address here outside of Boston in my neighborhood, I think there were about 140 somewhere in the vicinity of my home. And when I ran this report for downtown Boston, where our state house is, 4,512 big antennas within a 3-mile radius, mounted on buildings and on 1,520 cell towers in a 3-mile radius. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, there's this map that you get when you run this report. And then you can also maybe find something in your own local area where you can start looking at it. But this is one neighborhood in Boston called Hyde Park. Look how densely populated this poor residential neighborhood is with these cell towers right on top of them. And now the industry is adding these 5G small cells for the Internet of Things. 5G just means 5th generation technology. It sounds, common enough. It comes after 3G and 4G. Well, 3G and 4G and 2G, they use these longer wavelengths. The frequency is much less. When you get into 5th generation technology, all that's left to monetize are the little tiny millimeter waves on something called the electromagnetic spectrum. The important thing is to know that the waves come in different sizes. The long waves can penetrate through stuff like you, like our walls, like our floors, like our ceilings, and get to your device inside a building. All that's left to monetize are these tiny little millimeter waves. And so the industry has gotten permission from our government to monetize those. And they are spinning it up that we're going to have faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways, woohoo, all this great stuff. And they're not telling us the truth about the biological effects. And then if you scratch the surface a little deeper, you discover that the same companies that are promoting all this cool streaming, they're buying up the entertainment industry. So they're pushing this product at you. They're pushing all these apps at you, and they're installing all this toxic technology to build out more capacity because they want every home to have 200 wirelessly connected devices. And so they need to have cell towers everywhere. So their solution is to put millions of 5G small cell antennas that may look like these canisters, or they could be hanging them on the wires in your neighborhood. They could be putting them under manhole covers, but they want to put them every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhood, literally at the curb, outside people's front and backyards, right at bedroom height. That is what 5G is if we don't stop it. And this is a map of Boston. So in addition to all those dots we saw on the big macro cell antennas, look at the smothering of close range microwave radiation in Boston today. And this is happening in big cities all across the country and in small towns too, before they get made to stop. They are coming in very often in the cover of dark even sometimes and installing these small cells and literally lopping off the trees because these dinky little millimeter waves can't go through objects like the bigger waves can. So leaves, snow, rain could disrupt and degrade the signal quality from the 5G millimeter antennas. So they just come in and lop off the trees at the same time that our cities are trying to grow the tree canopy to provide shade to help protect us from climate change. So it's just incredible what this industry will not stop at. Congressman Richard Blumenthal up in Washington, D.C. from Connecticut, he was at a commerce hearing and he said on 5G, and he said to 2 industry leaders, so please share with us, how much money has your industry invested in proving this is safe before it came to market? And the 2 industry guys kind of hemmed and hawed, and then ultimately they were made to admit that, We don't know of any actual studies that have been done on this. So Richard Blumenthal said, so as far as health and safety is concerned, we are flying blind here. And that's the way the industry rolls. And Computer World and others have already begun reporting that 5G is a big joke. It's a big marketing term for the industry. It's good for their bottom line, but they're not even delivering what they're saying. The speeds with 5G aren't even any faster than what we already had with 4G. So we've been sold a bill of goods time and again. And there went Verizon, you know, at the beginning of last year, woohoo, 100 million of our customers are going to have 5G now. Well, yeah, and you're going to be radiating the heck out of them. There was a lot of rumors and stuff flying around with COVID. Oh my gosh, did 5G cause COVID? When you look at the science, that's not what the science says. However, there is very strong evidence showing that in the areas where there were high radiation exposures, like Wuhan, China, which in October 31st of 2019 rolled out their smart city with 10,000 close range small cells. And this is happening all over the world. So when you have a high dose exposure, our bodies never get a break. This is pulsating close range 24/7, and it's cumulative. And our poor biological cells only have so much energy that's pretty well calibrated to get us through what used to be a normal day and night. And now we have all this man-made toxic exposure, and our poor little cells are in there, you know, working as hard as they can, but they can't keep up with it all. And it's cumulative. And then we start tipping over into sickness. So Dr. Rob Brown and Dr. Beverly Rubik published this paper. And usually when you do a peer review, 2 or 3 other professionals who are highly qualified to look at your work will do a peer review of your study. And then if they agree that this is viable, it was done scientifically appropriately, then your paper gets published. They went through the most rigorous peer review on this paper. There were 15 or 16 peer reviewers on this. And ultimately, their paper was published professionally. Evidence for a connection between coronavirus disease 19 and exposure to radio frequency radiation from wireless communications, including 5G. They showed statistically significant higher death rates and higher COVID case rates in the areas with high radiation exposures. So Dr. Magda Havas was the co-chair of the EMF Medical Conference. She is a professor emeritus, which means she retired with honors from Trent University, where she taught electromagnetic radiation for 25 years. She knows that our governments, by and large, have dropped the ball on this, and they are not monitoring this cumulative impact from all these devices, now the cars, now the satellites, now the cell towers, the small cells, the smart meters, and everybody's stuff. Nobody's monitoring it. So she is asking all of us as citizen scientists, those who purchase or borrow the Safe Living Technologies Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, because you have to use the same equipment to do a scientific experiment. We are going out into our communities, and she has a protocol that we just put on a clipboard, and we go and we measure down the main strip of our town, and we take down the readings, and then we put it into her database. And she nicknamed this her brag project. Like, can you brag about your town's radiation exposures? So B stands for blackout bad, more than 100,000 microwatts. Red stands for getting into pretty red alert here with 10,000 to 100,000 microwatts per square meter. A is for amber, 1,000 to 10,000, and G is for green, which would be 1,000 or less. And years ago, scientists got together in Salzburg, and they came up with this guideline that said, you know, indoors, we know we need to be at almost nothing, so your body can cell repair and regeneration. But if you're just out and about and the environment is 1,000 or less, you might actually be able to do okay in cell repair at home in a safe environment, unless you're spending your time directly under that radiating infrastructure for a long period of time. So the goal is to measure this and then use that information to work with our towns, to work with policy leaders and start getting this right. So what do some of these outdoor measurements look like today? We want to be at 1,000 or less. I think Lori measured up at her New Hampshire Westmoreland Fire Department. It was in the green at 417. In Keene, New Hampshire, this was pre-pandemic. They were already starting to get into trouble, and now the industry has forced these small cells in at close range inside neighborhoods. So I'm guessing this is now in the higher levels of danger. Nashua was already in the red. Concord already in the red. That's where their capital. Deb Hodgson and I measured during the pandemic. So we're just walking down the street and we're getting a red reading. And there weren't even many people on the street. There were very few cars going by with everything radiating off the cars. So this was on a very quiet day, and it was still that bad from the infrastructure. And then in Stratham, New Hampshire, where Deb and Rep. Patrick Abrami, who introduced this groundbreaking bill that we'll introduce you to in a second, already in the black zone. And then here in the north end of Boston, it's a wonderful community where all of our beautiful Italian restaurants and bakeries are. It's a huge tourist attraction. This is Hanover Street, which runs down the main drag, and you can see the shops on the first floor, but then people live right above them. And they're putting what looks like a really pretty wrought iron lamppost. This thing was radiating high levels. These are actually cell towers inside here. So as they were negotiating putting these in through their community board, they put these really pretty ones on the the popular street. But then when you go to the crossroads and you look down, there's this ugly gray monopole stuck right outside people's bedrooms down the side road. So this is what's happening today in real time in many of our communities. So that's all the bad news. Let's start looking at solutions. And we'll go through a bunch of slides, but I'm not going to go through everything in detail because you can just go drill into what catches your attention and look and see what it is that you might like to do to get started on your exploration of this topic. But we take a lot of hope from Martin Luther King Jr. He taught us that when we finally do the right thing in society, it comes through 3 channels. First, the public learns about it and gets engaged. And that's what we're hoping to inspire today by giving you the facts and teaching you how you can open this conversation credibly. First, where you are with your loved ones, then expand the circle to your towns and your legislators. And together, we can work toward solutions. The second area, aside from the public, is it gets taken through the courts, and the guilty, in this case, the environmental polluters in the wireless industry, get held accountable. And we're going to tell you some really exciting movement in the courts. And then ultimately, public policy catches up. And for this, it would be catching up to the science. And we've got some terrific inroads happening in that as well. So let's take a quick look at the legal solutions. Remember, we talked about the Food and Drug Administration had commissioned this $30 million study with the National Toxicology Program that found clear evidence of cancers and DNA damage. And then we said that Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, instead of protecting you and I and translating that into public policy, he went over to the FCC and said, nothing to look at here. We don't believe those studies. Keep doing what you're doing. As soon as he did that, the FCC entered a formal document into something called the Federal Register. Once it got filed in the Federal Register, then the lawsuits began. The Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and others sued the FCC for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm that was filed into the public record with the FCC, and they completely blew it off. So that lawsuit was won. The 3 judges in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the FCC was arbitrary and capricious in their finding that they could stick with these antiquated 1996 public radiation exposure limits. And I didn't know what arbitrary and capricious meant, but it turns out they didn't do their homework. They just made it up that they could keep doing this because not one federal agency has done the formal review of the science. They just keep pushing industry priorities. So there are lawsuits that have happened all over the country. One that we're watching carefully right now is, I mentioned that Verizon put a cell tower on top of this neighborhood in Pittsfield. Well, these sickened citizens were presenting for years. It's now been 3+ years that they're presenting to their mayor, to their city council, to their zoning and planning boards. And about halfway through, their mayor and city council finally said to the Board of Health, yeah, you guys need to investigate this. So for the first time in the United States, the Board of Health investigated. They spoke to the doctors who knew how to do a radiation diagnosis to these sick families. They spoke to world-leading scientists. They spoke to engineers who actually understand how toxic this is. And they brought in the industry representatives because we want all voices at the table so we can weigh it all out. Well, the industry brings in this Dr. Eric Swanson, and he is a PhD, but he specializes in physics. He has never published one paper on the biological effects of this man-made radiation. He specializes in quarks and other properties of physics. They document this through the Board of Health in this emergency order that they issued to Verizon, asking them to come to the table within a week and tell them why they shouldn't issue a cease and desist order. Well, Verizon being Verizon, you know, they're the big bullies on the block. They go to the courts and they ask for an injunction against the Board of Health because they hide behind the FCC Telecom Act from 1996, saying, oh, these towns, they have nothing to say. It says right here in the law, we get to come in and put this cell tower wherever we want. Well, that is not what the law says. And besides that, the Board of Health had spoken to their state level attorneys and determined that those FCC laws only apply to the applications to site a cell tower. Once something comes into the community, if it's causing harm or nuisance, it is the Board of Health's duty and responsibility to address it. So right now, and the Board of Health went to their state level attorneys and said, we'll probably have to take this through court. What's it going to cost us? There were two different paths that came up to $80-some thousand, which is not going to break the bank for a big city like Pittsfield. And lo and behold, the mayor and the city council would not back their own Board of Health to try and get these families back into their homes because they've been displaced and sick for a very long time. So now there is a lawsuit, with great thanks to Children's Health Defense that are defending the families in this lawsuit, to remove that injunction on the Board of Health and to empower the Board of Health to get in there and do the job that they want to do. The court heard the preliminaries on this and said, yes, it does look like this is a viable case. So now it is in the judge's hands, and we are hoping that we will hear a judge's ruling before the end of this year. So keep an eye on Pittsfield. They are leading the world on this. And here at the Face School in Southborough, Massachusetts, where children were getting sick from the industrial strength Wi-Fi, for the first time in the United States, the courts recognized that it's not just about the heat. You don't have to have heat to have harm. They recognize the non-thermal biological effects. So each court case builds off each other. And there are court cases happening all over the country and all over the world. So you can familiarize yourself with those. The third area, aside from educating the public and working through the courts, is to have public policy to protect us. New Hampshire today leads the nation. When we brought this to Representative Patrick Abrami, he and Deb Hodgson drove down to my home. We helped him to connect the dots, and he came up with a bill that had very direct questions that demand answers, including, why have Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, and other world-leading insurers long since recognized that this is an environmental pollutant, and they put exclusions in their policies so they don't cover for damages, and our towns and our schools are going to be left on the hook for the damages that are coming? Why does the legal fine print tell us, like we looked at in an earlier slide, to keep these off of our body? Why are thousands of studies being ignored by the FCC. And why is the FCC not even looking at the non-thermal science? And why do we allow 100 times more radiation to our public than certain other countries already have started reining it in? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of putting a child into a classroom with wireless access points that are very powerful, that are powerful enough to power hundreds of wireless devices at once, let alone the smart board, the minis, all the wearables, everybody's cell phone? These kids are getting jackhammered from all directions, and it's happening in our own homes and outside in our communities. So we brought in the experts, and within 7 months, we got that passed through the House, through the Senate, through the governor, and New Hampshire became the first government in the country to do an independent investigation. And they also saved 2 seats at the table for the industry to tell us what they came to tell us. They kept promising they were going to send studies showing it was safe, and it was just hot air. They never provided the commission with any studies showing it's safe, because there are none. So at the end of the day, the New Hampshire legislature, on a vote of 10-3, there were 10 commission members, highly qualified doctors, scientists, engineers, people from their attorney general's office and other state agencies. And then there were 2 guys from industry, 2 people from industry, Beth Ann Cooley and Dave Juvet at the state level. Beth Ann was at the national level. And then this Senator Gray, who sided with industry. 10-3, they voted to put this commission report out to the public. And there's kind of a gift in there, because anytime in New Hampshire where everybody's not unanimous, those in the minority get to include a minority report. And so what we have in this New Hampshire commission is 400 pages that includes an appendix with all the minutes. So it was a completely transparent process. Thank you to Deb Hodgson, who volunteered her time to do the minutes. They were all voted into the public record. The appendix includes the science. It includes their outreach to our federal agencies, who just blew them off and would not come talk to this state level commission. And the first 17 pages include their summary findings and executive recommendations. Hardwire, migrate away from wireless, protect our kids, educate the public, protect our schools, label everything that's radiating, get our building inspectors involved so they can measure how much radiation is there if you're going to look or buy, lease or buy a property, and get our federal delegates on the ball with this, and get our federal agencies on the ball with this to protect us and the environment. That's the first 17 pages. It's in pretty big print too, so it's quick to go through. Pages 18 through 27, the next 10 pages, is kind of a gift from industry, because that's their playbook. That's what they're in there telling our towns and our legislators. And it sounds like, wow, this sounds so credible, until you go to the last minutes that are recorded at the back of that appendix, where Senator Denise Ricciardi and Dr. Paul Heroux call out the industry for never providing the science. And then point by point, they go through and debunk what's in that minority report. So we know the facts, and we've got them documented. So that Pittsfield Board of Health 28-page document and this 400-page report out of New Hampshire are probably the 2 strongest things you can present to your town and highly credibly introduce this topic and debunk everything that the industry is spinning. Dr. Kent Chamberlain from the University of New Hampshire, he was the chairman. He's now chair emeritus and professor of the Computer and Electrical Engineering Department. He was an industry guy for 30 years developing medical devices using this man-made radiation. And when he was appointed to this commission, he thought, oh, this will be a slam dunk. Of course, Wi-Fi is fine. But bless Dr. Chamberlain, he, being an engineer, had only been taught you have to have heat. He dove into the science with his colleagues on this commission, and he did a complete 180 and saw how damaging this radiation is. And now he is out there joining experts and speaking out publicly all over the world to educate on the facts. He did a 20-minute presentation on this New Hampshire Commission report, and his slides are provided excellent resources for you to use to learn from and to teach others. So long story short, they have these 15 recommendations, and for the last couple of years, New Hampshire has been introducing bills to start addressing some of the big points on this report. And every time the industry gets in there and gets in the ear of the legislators, and they keep defeating these bills, but we keep trying. Frank Clegg, that retired president of Microsoft Canada, who spoke down at the National Institutes of Health with us, he submitted his testimony, and that's another document you can print out. It's short, just a few pages. He indicates that wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. It has outlived its useful life as a main source of connectivity. Again, fiber optics to and through the premises, where we just connect to our own personal devices with Ethernet cables and adapters. We will have amazing technology without the harm. So we have bills, again, in 2023 in New Hampshire, and then Maine, Rep. Tracy Quint and 10 other legislators introduced a bill there to do what New Hampshire has done. And Connecticut, with Rep. David Michel, he introduced another bill to start addressing these small cells and smart meters that are, walloping us at close range. And then we have 6 bills here in Massachusetts today. The first 2 are with our Joint Committee on Consumer Protection. And this one would form a commission, Senate 155, like New Hampshire did. We've had that bill going for 8 years, and New Hampshire got theirs passed into law in 7 months. Also, a bill to protect children from handheld devices. Today, we were at the State House and we had a hearing on getting our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education empowered by law to investigate and protect our children from wireless radiation in schools. We ask that everybody send in a statement of support, and I will be sending out a communique with additional information on how to send those written statements in. This is how we use our voices to invoke our democracy. We've already had the hearing recently on the smart meters. The first step is to give everybody the right to choose not to have one of those toxic meters on their homes. We should have a right to a safe public utility and not be charged an extortion fee to get the safe analog meters put back on, and not be charged an extortion fee to pay every month to get your reading. During the pandemic, those people who had analog meters, they were allowed to just take a picture of it and send it in by email. There's no cost involved with that. So we can do it. Vermont already has a no-fee opt-out. That's the first step. The real solution is to do what Chattanooga, Tennessee has done, where they didn't do wireless. They just hardwired the utility meters to the premises, and now they can get whatever data it is that they need without any radiation. Attorney Scott McCullough has been very gracious to give time to our legislators. He helped Representative Tricia Farley Bouvier, who is in that neighborhood in Pittsfield where the cell tower made her neighbors so sick. We have pretty good civil rights legislation in Massachusetts, but Scott helped to choose the appropriate language so that we improve that civil rights such that anybody with a disability has the right to ask for reasonable accommodations. Because if you get electromagnetically sick, how can you go to your doctor's office when the first thing they do is hand you an iPad to sign in? And then they use a laptop to start taking your vitals. And then they have wireless all over the offices. So people need to be able to ask for a white space or a clean zone to go to the doctors, to go to the grocery store, to access the critical things that we need in our society. Some of the hotels are actually starting to do low EMF rooms, so it's catching on. But if we could get our laws strengthened up, then it would give people the right to say, here, I am protected under disability and civil rights. Please grant me this accommodation. Scott McCullough, he is the attorney who presented the oral arguments in the lawsuit that sued and won against the FCC. He also helped, actually this one, I'm sorry, was with Senator Paul Mark. And he also helped Representative Tricia Farley Bouvier in Pittsfield introduce this House 2158 because so many people are getting sick and there's no way to track that data. Well, our state and probably other states already have databases that do that for Parkinson's, for COVID, for food poisoning, all these other illnesses. It's high time that electromagnetic sensitivities be included in that registry so that when you go to your doctor or you go to your health agent in your town, they can put that data in. And then with better data, we can do better reporting and we can make better public policy decisions. So lots of great stuff happening, and there's more going on. And you can go to our bills in other states page and look at that. And take heart when we find the courage to talk about this. It's really exciting because you get to go in there and people are going to look at you like you're nuts. The industry's been telling your town that, nah, it's only the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people who care about this issue. It's fine. It's well within the FCC limits, yada, yada, yada. And they'll say, nobody cares. Well, look at this. You go to this link at Americans for Responsible Technology, and there are more than 150 groups already established all over the United States that are working on this. And Children's Health Defense now has chapters that they're developing all over the United States, and they have taken on electromagnetic radiation as one of their primary platforms. And we know that everybody has their own views on vaccinations, but please don't throw out the baby in the bathwater. Look at the science and take advantage of the incredible resources that they have put together at Children's Health Defense and all these other wonderful websites. So here in Massachusetts, just take heart that all these towns have already been winning the battle because citizens got involved, came calmly, professionally, presented the facts, and stuck with it. Nobody's going to take the ball and run with it for you. You have to pick it up time and again and keep it in front of your town until you get your zoning code changed to what it needs to be. So lots happening. And even at the town level, the towns are starting to band together and submitting statements into the FCC saying, we believe the public, we've looked at the science, this is not safe. Boston joined a bunch of other mayors, towns around the country and sued the FCC. They didn't win that one. But wow, what a statement that our towns are speaking up. Burlington, Massachusetts came out with the first small cell policy that said, if we let you put these in our town, you have to come back every single year and recertify that this is still viable under current law. And we as a town, we don't have the expertise for that certification. So we're going to have to keep an expert on retainer, and you, telecom vendor, you're going to have to pay for that service to get this recertified every year. Well, the Verizon attorney was at that meeting when they ratified their small cell policy and said, well, we don't want to set precedent, for an annual fee or an annual recertification, because they know they're pushing millions of these in. And if every town does this, that's going to hit their bottom line pretty hard. So there are so many good examples at Americans for Responsible Technology, and they've come up with a template for you to take to your town and a checklist to say, hey, let's look at our zoning code and let's get our local attorney involved. Most local attorneys are great, but they are way out of their depth when it comes to telecom law. And so others are already making changes. Your town should too. But it's critically important that our towns bring in an expert who's been in industry before and now is working for our towns and the citizens once they've figured out what this harm really is. So lots of good stuff happening. In Easton, Connecticut, a grandmother figured out what 5G was, went to her town board. There was a doctor on it, did the deep dive. They came up with a moratorium, and they've re-upped their moratorium until it can be proven safe. Hawaii County put forth a resolution. This is going on all over the world, but we don't hear about it because the industry owns mainstream media. But look at what's going on in our schools. Louisiana had a team of doctors who got together and unanimously passed a law to start getting back to a balance between technology. We can't just shove technology in our faces of our children and expect that they're going to learn appropriately. We need to get them outside. We know scientifically, children, all of us, need movement. We need contact. with humans. We need contact with nature. And we need to be looking at each other. We need to be connecting in the full interpersonal ways that we as humans are meant to connect, not through the shallows of a screen. So Louisiana has passed a law, and they just came out with best practices for digital devices to strike that balance back in nature and with true human connection, and reserve technology as just a tool, not the primary way to teach. And get this, Finland and the Netherlands have announced that they are getting tech out of the classroom because it didn't turn out to be a great thing. It turned out to be a huge distraction, and their testing scores are falling. The New York Times, Silicon Valley executives are banning screens from their children. They're sending their children to schools with no technology, not wireless, not hardwired, but no tech, because they know that's not how a brain properly develops. And they're going as so far as to have their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children, yet they keep pushing it at our children. And God bless our friends Patty and Doug Wood at Grassroots Environmental Education. They have the Americans for Responsible Technology project to help your towns. And now they have launched this Tech Safe Schools program. Go out to their website and tell them where you are, and they will send a packet of information to your school administrators to teach them the health risks, the legal risks, and most importantly, how to mitigate. Start where we are, just start reducing all the power, for example. We've got full tilt radiation blaring all the time. You can take that down 90% and still get connectivity. You can start putting wall switches on to completely turn off the wireless, except for the few minutes that you might need it, and learn how to turn off at the device level all this radiation. And then make your way, as we said, to just hardwire it again. All the infrastructure is there in our schools. They just need some guidance. So Tech Safe Schools will help with that. Dr. Alexia McKnight and I were invited to do professional development down at her children's schools in Pennsylvania. So we've got about a 45-minute video here of how we taught the teachers in her school what this issue is and how to fix it. And then the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already developed K through 12 prevention curriculum for cell phones and wireless. So we've got all this stuff laid out for you. And as I mentioned, we've got the professional training already developed for your schools, and we've got the certificate to track it so that, you know, just like our schools have to do anti-bullying and physical restraint training, they have to take ethics training, and then all that goes through human resources, and they check it off to make sure that the staff is all up to date. We can provide that too with this little course, half-hour online. We can train the whole school. And then our friends at Environmental Health Trust have just a plethora of 1- and 2-pagers. They've got postcards and little cards, all sorts of resources to make it easy for you to open this conversation with your doctors, to open it with your friends and your loved ones, to open it with your schools and your town and your legislators. And then Maryland, through their hard work, has become the first state-level public health agency to recommend hardwiring the schools, and they just came out with a fact sheet. So powerful stuff to empower you to start working on this. The U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools puts out a set of guidelines to rate schools on how green they are. And they actually have a module, thanks to Dr. Tony Stein. They have a module on low EMF best practices to address not only the wireless, but the dirty electricity. If the wires aren't put in correctly in the walls, that can throw dirty electricity and electro and magnetic fields into the learning space or even at home. If all that's not wired properly, those man-made energies can make people very sick as well. So look at that. They've already got a module on that for us. And then during the pandemics, the country of Cyprus came out with national safety recommendations for how to study safely at home. Hardwire if you can. As we said, create as much distance and learn to turn everything off when you're not using it. So many great resources. And then professionally, we always say start where you are, right? We've all just got to begin where we are. Talk to your doctors. If you're a healthcare practitioner, know that the very first electromagnetic fields of wireless communications, biological and health effects, the first college textbook just came out this year. Excellent resource here. And then Dr. Cindy Russell and others founded Physicians for Safe Technology. So it frames it up from a physician's viewpoint. Where's the science? How do we address this? Where's that medical conference? It's all right there. And our school counselors, our guidance counselors, our psychotherapists, all of our nurses, all of our school doctors, they can get that free training today. And then for our engineers, physicists, technologists, architects, etc., look at all these amazing resources too. So it's all out there. We just have to help people connect the dots and stay with it, because very rarely do you find somebody who has that wow moment and actually clears room on their already overflowing plates to do something about it. We have to own it as the civilians. So what can we do? Some people are do-it-yourselfers, and it's not intimidating at all to just start getting Ethernet cables and adapters, then go find all those antennas, and then just measure to see if you got it all. For some people, that throws us way out of our comfort zone. So isn't it good to know there's an entire profession called building biology, and these are highly trained, certified consultants who you can either bring them into your homes and schools and offices, or you can do online consultations and they'll ship you the equipment to get the readings, and then they'll do a report and teach you how to mitigate. Maybe you bring in an electrician to run wires and put Ethernet jacks in the rooms where you use technology most, but there's help at every turn, folks. This award-winning film took Best Documentary at the Washington, D.C. Independent Film Festival. It took Best Documentary at the Women's Independent Film Festival, and it was part of the United Nations Film Festival. Generation Zapped. In 74 minutes, you'll have an amazing, non-threatening, very informative, even funny at some points, way to bring your family and your friends together. Do a living room screening. It's now available on Amazon Prime and through most of our library streaming services, or you can just go order it online. Look at this, PBS. Bert Wolf does his travel show. Camilla Reese and Dr. Mallory Blythe did 2 half-hour episodes. How cool is that to share? And then here it is, our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have built this toolkit for you. They have everything you need. How to start a group, or maybe there's already a group in your area. You can join a group through them. You can find letters to send to your local editor. Start getting this out in the public. They have letters to send to your town. They have all of these sample ordinances that you can use with your town to get your zoning straightened out. And they have actual real ordinances where people like you and I have worked with our towns and actually made the changes that we need to have in our communities. So we need to look at ourselves first. And again, we want to get to as low as reasonably achievable. And we know our children are watching. They are big fans of monkey see, monkey do. So if we're stuck behind a screen all the time and we're not meaningfully interacting with them, first, we're robbing them of their childhoods. Second, we've just given them permission to do what we're doing. So let's step back and just first look. And then let's be reminded of 50 ways to take a break. Do things together, get out in nature, go help a neighbor, go climb a tree, go sing a song, go create music, go meditate, go to a concert, go dance, go do an act of kindness for somebody, go play with your pets, go play with your neighbor's kids, get back out and start living life again instead of being behind our screen. And then this book, The Earth Prescription. So there was another one that came out called Earthing or Grounding, and it talked about the science that teaches us that Schumann's resonance, where the earth pulsates 7.83 times per second with this beautiful healing energy. And I read it and I got the science and I thought, but I live in the Northeast. I can't go trekking around barefoot 6 months out of the year here. And then Dr. Laura Conover came up with her book, The Earth Prescription, that takes it by all 4 seasons and gives dozens of creative, clever, fun, community building ideas for how to get there and ground naturally and get that healing energy and get us away from our screens. So here's what we want to do for our towns. At the municipal level, we want to get to that as low as reasonably achievable that the CDC already has for ionizing radiation. They are another captured agency, and they have not done their job to expand this to non-ionizing radiation, but we always have hope. Our towns need to investigate. So one of my pages is for municipal leaders, and we have to make sure they differentiate between what the industry is pushing in and what our public priorities need to be. Reinventing Wires, the future of landlines and networks, is free and available online. It's a public policy paper out of Washington, D.C. by leading experts that talk about a dozen reasons why we have to invest in fiber optics to and through the premises and only defer to wireless for secondary connectivity. That will reduce the capacity demands, and then we won't need close range cell towers, and we certainly won't need radiating smart meters on our homes. So all of this is free, and we must measure against biological effects, not these bogus limits that our government has set. So next steps, first we have to admit there's a problem and accept that there are no safe levels of man-made radiation in the scientific literature. So even the head of the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, when she ran that NTP study, she said, there are still some good people, definitely at the federal level, but we need us to work this through at the state, at the local level, at the state level, and push it up to the federal level. So yeah, we can't just expect someone to fix this for this, but education is the beginning. We are doing these free webinars every month. Push people our way, invite them, and we will do the trainings. We can be brought in, I can be brought in to do forums with your town. You can look at these as examples. And we've got to get these kids protected as soon as possible. So start talking to other parents, watch Generation Zap together, and let's do it together and get those kids protected. Even if public policy isn't set yet, you get enough parents working on this, you get enough parents pulling their kids out of school because they're getting sick, we will start seeing some meaningful action. And what groups do you belong to, whether it's a civic group or a professional group? A lot of them are looking for speakers, and that's my happy place. I love teaching people about this, so bring me in. And at the local level, our town, tech is here. So let's make sure we're doing it safely. We need tech safety committees. We need our towns to offer a no-fee opt-out on those smart meters. And we need to stop with the wireless infrastructure and start going to hardwired. And let's use the tools that we've got. And don't be afraid to recommend your town hire somebody like Andrew Campanelli, who used to work for industry till he figured out what they were doing. And now he routinely sues the industry, and he wins in 75 to 80% of his cases if he can get in there and work on your zoning bylaws before the cell towers go in. So get your conversation going. How are your zoning code bylaws written and what needs to fix it? And it's short money. I think his fee is like $8,500. That's short money for a town to bring an expert in to rewrite your zoning. So for today, again, we apologize. We know it's a lot, but the bottom line is take control of what you have control over. Notice, what do I have that radiates? Start with baby steps. Create a sleep sanctuary so your body can repair. It can't do it if you've got microwave pulsating. Then make your way to Ethernet cables and adapters. Start making a habit out of choosing airplane mode and only turning on the one antenna you actually need for the shortest amount of time you can get away with. And look at these beautiful resources from Environmental Health Trust. They've got a bunch more. So start taking these flyers, have something in hand when you're opening this conversation. So you don't have to know everything. You can just help them connect the dots to trustworthy resources like the Facebook page at New Hampshire for Safe Tech, or you can email them directly at newhampshireforsafetechnology@gmail.com. My website is built out with all the science. We've got a state efforts page that shows everything going on in our state and other states. And then you can email me directly at ma4@safetech@gmail.com. So I'm going to stop the share here and see if we have anything in our chat tonight. Deb, thank you for coming back to join us. Deb is our hero in New Hampshire. She is the impetus behind that New Hampshire report. She got so sick from the wireless in her home. And one of my favorite parts of her terrible story is that her kids, this is not an easy conversation. So our spouses, our kids are thinking, yeah, mom's lost her mind again, right? But we're responsible primarily for keeping our families safe. And so Deb was coming off of Coumadin, and she had learned that this radiation could affect the blood clotting and thinning and all of that. So she decided she was going to hardwire. And her kids had given her this plant that just sat there in her kitchen for months or a year, I don't know, doing nothing. And Deb, what happened after you hardwired your house and turned off all the radiation?
The plant sat there for a year doing nothing. And then within 2 months of hardwiring and turning off all of wireless, it had grown 15 inches in 2 months.
Oh my goodness. Imagine what our bodies can do.
Yes, that got my kids to realize, oh,
yeah. And my kids
maybe it's
too,
not just mom.
and my husband, they didn't want to hear it, but we have to be the example, and nobody wants to know this is true, right? But they come around. When my husband was getting new equipment at work, he asked if he could borrow my meter. When he was buying a new vehicle, he asked if he could borrow my meter. When my daughter went off and got her first apartment, the first time she said, Mom, I don't need these women I'm moving in with. Don't say anything to them. And then by the time she was looking, but I still helped her move, and I took my meter. I wanted to make sure her head was not near a router or a smart meter in her bedroom. By the time she got her second apartment, and when she bought her first car, she said, hey, Mom, will you come with me? Will you bring your meter? Let's see what's going on. So people do come around.
They
and
do.
Today, 10 years later, we have got powerful resources. So let's not be shy about opening the conversation. And we're here to hear, we'll carry the load for you. You guys just have to be the ones in your community to get the ball rolling.
We do have a question in
Yes.
the chat, and this is from Carl in Connecticut. Please address in-power notice of liability activities to get government officials and utility companies to cease smart meter installation and utilization. What effort has been made with Eversource, if known? Thanks, Carl from Connecticut.
Carl, that's an excellent question. I know that Josh Del Sol and his partner in Canada, Cal, Washington, had been working on that In-Power program. I don't know how they have fared with that. But yeah, Eversource has been a bugger on this. But Jennifer White, who is one of the co-founders with Deb and Lori on New Hampshire for Safe Technology, she actually got Eversource to get her a non-radiating meter because she had family members who were getting sick from this radiation. So they'll tell you there's no opt-out, but we do have examples of where they did offer an opt-out. And here in Massachusetts, if we can get that no-fee opt-out bill passed, maybe that will help in Connecticut. So you have to start the conversation in your own town. Nobody's going to fix it for you. Rep. David Michelle out of Stamford just held an expert forum with their city council in Stamford this past month. And so, you can turn your state rep and senator into contact with Rep. David Michelle, and maybe we can start building synergies there too. So we got to keep.
Can you leave that information in the chat, please? That who that rep is?
Sure.
And, yeah, because I've reached out to Senator Jeff Gordon, who's my state senator, and at this point it's kind of deaf ears. But I tried to get him to also support I can't remember the bill that said opting out of the smart meters
Yeah.
and 5G. It
Yeah.
didn't go very far from what I can tell. And I'm not convinced that Jeff Gordon is going to be a big friend. I think, at
Yeah,
this
and
point.
industry's been so persuasive and there's so much money involved. It's hard. It's hard for our state reps, but just because they didn't get it the first time doesn't mean we stop.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you go to my website, Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and you go to our resources page, right at the beginning, there's a list of bulleted items. One of them says EMF, points of confusion versus fact. And what I did is I culled out a lot of the disinformation just in this simple table. And it says like, well, the FCC says it's fine. And then there's the facts that you can have links to that show why that's no longer okay to say. And it goes through all these points of disinformation, and it's short and it's sweet, and it's only 4 pages. And the last page has a picture that shows all the biological harm scientifically that we know is happening. So that is something that people are telling me they really like, and they print out a bunch of copies and they keep it with them. And when they go and have these conversations, they can hand it to them and say, look, I know this sounds like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but you've got to look at this, and hand them that and see what happens.
The in power notice the liability. It sounds powerful, but it also sounds a bit tricky too, where you might get, you might get your electricity turned off.
Yeah.
I've got a power share, and I've got, solar on the rooftop, and so I send it out to the grid, and it comes in, and in some good, in most days, my production's great. But on days like today, where it's overcast and nasty, or it has been most of the summer, quite honestly, we haven't been producing as much. Could we still be off grid? We'd be close, but
I'm not an expert in that. What I would recommend you do is reach out to the Building Biology Institute. They have a set of fact sheets for free that you can just go start investigating this stuff on your own.
yeah.
And
Ken, what's Ken's last
Gartner?
name? Yeah, Ken
Yeah.
came and did a building biology test of our house, and we're moving along. I mean, I've done a lot of things that you've suggested. You've made a mistake in that I didn't find out about. You didn't make a mistake. I did about 2 years earlier, because I built a house with Wi-Fi and no hardwire. So I've since hardwired it, but I also got two Eversource smart meters, not one, but two.
We are in the same boat. We have Eversource and we have solar panels. My husband really wanted to get the solar panels and take advantage of the tax break.
Yeah.
And we actually used that as an educational opportunity. We interviewed 5 different companies. And after Steve talked to them about, the business end of putting that solar system in, I talked to them about the radio frequency radiation. And so we kind of did the best that we could. I went out to other homes that had installed with this particular company, and I measured inside and outside how much radiation would be coming. And we got them to make sure that there were no RF antennas on any of the panels themselves. And so we did our best to try and get it as low as we could. And there's always the question as to whether it's introducing dirty electricity, electric and magnetic fields onto the house. So just because these industries are pushing this technology doesn't mean it's just a good thing. We have to do these things carefully. But keep in touch with Ken Gartner, because he certainly has much more expertise in those areas.
I mean that just, my personal case, the roof is best I could tell, because I actually have a solar roof as opposed to panels.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. It's really nice. But my problem is the inverters that communicate directly with Tesla. And, my concern is twofold. One is they're radiating, and they no longer are on the land, but they're radiating all the way to the tower. So they're no longer radiating just a little bit, they're radiating all the way to the tower. And also, so that's one issue, but the other issue is if we go lights out, power gets turned off. My guess is Tesla will turn my lights off as well with my inverters because they have control over them right now.
I'm so sorry. What a mess.
Yeah.
But just as you said, keep inching your way to as low as reasonably achievable. And, you know, based on what you're feeling, what your health is, you'll have decisions to make perhaps down
Yeah.
the line, whether that house is still safe for you to be in or whether you disable the system. But again, take it one day at a time and just know what the symptoms are and
Right.
know you might need to make some changes. So Carl,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Yep. Sorry
Okay.
to. Yep.
Deb, were there any other questions that we should field?
Let me look here. I believe that was it.
Okay.
Comments from people thanking you.
Thank you. Hey, Lexi McKnight, are you still with us? If you are, could you unmute
Yes.
for a second?
Yes, I am right here.
Hi, darling. How are you?
Thank you. Such an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you. And I was so honored to present with you down in your schools. Is there anything we can do to help move that along in your schools today?
I recently met with our interested elementary teacher just the other week. And I hope to meet with her again on that, try to revisit meeting with some interested parents, trying to form a nidus that might, snowball. So I'm working on it slowly. And as soon as there is an opportunity for you to jump in, you will be the first to know about it.
Awesome. Well, wish me luck. We have a new upper elementary school in our town that I measured during the open house. And of course, as we know, the radiation was super high and the kids weren't even in there with all their devices yet. It was just the infrastructure and it was off the charts. So I'm meeting with her tomorrow. She's a new principal in our district too. And wish us luck because somebody's got to start protecting these poor little kiddos and the teachers. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in Pennsylvania. And we'll see if we can live up to it here in Massachusetts too.
Sure.
All
And
right.
New Hampshire.
Yeah, and New Hampshire and everywhere. And everybody's doing so many good things. We just need to, rise it all up together and really get meaningful action because it's cumulative and we can't keep making our kids this sick and ourselves. So, and our environment and our pollinators. And all right, everybody. Well, listen, we hope you have a tech safe evening and come back as many times as you want to pick up new pieces as you digest the ones that you could handle tonight. So Deb, thank you so much to you and Lori and Jen and everything that's there. We were excited to have Rep. Tom Plosach with us tonight from the New Hampshire legislature. He is getting his mind around this. We hope one day he will champion this issue as Representative Abrami did. But it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So let's just keep doing our best, guys. Every day we give hope and we try and plant one seed every day and let's see what we can get. All right, that's enough sunshine, guys. Go enjoy your evening. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Thank you, Cece.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.